as a high school animation teacher. I ended up being able to take 10 of my students to DreamWorks Studios yesterday to meet some of the people there. So thank you for adjusting for those of you who had. So, all right, let's get into it. There we go. So again, definitely feel free to take my email or check that linked up with me on LinkedIn over the course of this. But let's get into it. So a little bit about myself. I've been teaching for over 20 years, started in rural Texas doing Teach for America. I've been in Los Angeles and specifically LA Unified for over 20 years. I got a master's in screenwriting at USC. I've had some success as a screenwriter. I've had some films get made and done some directing of shorter documentaries and promos and stuff. So I brought that experience into the classroom with me. And back in 2013, I started at USC Media Arts and Engineering Magnet. We're right across the street from USC. We're a K through 12 Title I span school, and I teach all of the high school animation and video production classes. And when they brought me in, they didn't have either of those pathways. They'd gotten a national grant to at least start that pathway. In the first year, we did video production. And then 2 years after that, started animation and have had different partnerships along the way, different grants. As I mentioned here, as Ruth had mentioned, I was recognized as the National ACTE Teacher of the Year, and a couple other things that I've done. For those of you who are educators out there, teachers, especially in AME, I've helped to rewrite the current standards that are out there that were just approved by the California Department of Education back in November. So you may or may not be aware of this. So the AME will now become AED for Arts, Entertainment, and Design, as also be including some of the other design industries out there. And then connected to that, I was brought in by the Brick Foundation to write the first of its kind, approved both by California and the U.S. Department of Labor, the first animation, game design, and VFX apprenticeship program. So if you have any of your alums out there, definitely keep them in mind and send that information their way. So, but let's get into grants and focus on that. I typically will do this over 90 minutes, so 45 minutes, 50 minutes. I'll go a little bit, I'll stream it down a little bit, but definitely have questions, drop them in the chat along the way. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how I felt my kids deserved a little boost, grant writing 101, a success story that kind of launched me from going from smaller grants to larger grants, and then some of the out of the box successes or resources, I should say. And then, the first steps of your own journey. So, all right, let's get into it. As I said, I started building a program at my school. And when I first showed up, I was like, all right, what do we got? And they're like, here are the cameras we've got. They had these little 8 point and shoot Sony cameras. I think they're like $80 a piece at the time. And, you put the memory card in and you'd film 2 minutes of stuff and it'd already be full. So we were really limited, but, I took what we had and then, we just talked about guerrilla filmmaking and how could you go about that, go forward with those types of things. My animation kids, we did a lot of stop motion because that was something that our technology allowed us to have. And each year, the grant that came in allowed me to start getting some software and elaborate a little bit more. And the other thing I should say, all this was taking place in one classroom. So my classroom was not only the classroom where we learned, but it was our studio space. So we got some rolling tables that we could roll out of the way. We had to bring out the technology every day. So with our 90-minute classes, we'd end up burning through about 25 minutes setting up and taking down. So really trying to find ways to get my students a little bit better chance to succeed. And since then, through the grants that I've written, we've been able to get some professional cameras, some high grade tripods, latest in editing system and animation software. I've been able to completely revamp my computer, the computers I have in my lab, as well as get some professional mics and recording. We have professional light kits. We took one of the classrooms that wasn't being used and completely renovated it 1 year. And that was a grant that I wrote to completely kind of gut it, put up some sound. It's not soundproof, but at least we got some better acoustics in there. And now we've got a space where my classroom can stay as the classroom. And then we can move over to the studio space to do our recordings or our animation larger projects. And as I mentioned, the soundproofing of the studio. And, I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff here, and none of this happened in 1 year. None of this happened over the course of months. This was like years in the pathway of sort of being able to start from some smaller grants and building up from there into some larger grants. My first grants were for $250, $500. I got up to $2,000, which I thought was pretty exciting. And then about after 4 years, 5 years, we started getting, 5 figures, 6 figures. to really sort of make some significant changes. So let's go through and sort of talk about just some of the grant writing 101 things that I learned along the way, and other people shared their advice to me. But so this is these larger concepts. Even before you start putting pen to paper or start typing things up, really start thinking about these things. Start documenting all of your achievements, no matter how big or how small. And whether they're like, oh, we just do this little drawing thing, we do it every year, and you might not value it or think of it as a big thing, but to your grant applications, they're going to want evidence. They're going to see what you've been doing. So take those pictures, and obviously we don't always have. I know at Raleigh Unified we will get our photo release and stuff like that, but take those pictures behind your kids' heads if you need to, and see them drawing, see them working on their robotics, and I will pause here. I am going to talk mostly about AME and arts things, but obviously this stuff is relevant across the board. If you're doing engineering, you're doing healthcare, you're doing business, get those pictures, get some of that great work your students do. Take a photo of that, have that stuff, because you never know when you're going to be able to use that. But definitely start documenting that. Any field trips you go on, guest speakers you bring in, just have that stuff available for those grants. Your grant, to make it stronger, should really be about more than just your organization. Sometimes we think about it as like, oh, you know what? I need some colored pencils, so I'm just going to request colored pencils. And there's nothing wrong with needing colored pencils. But like, what can those do beyond just your classroom? Because ultimately, you got to think about it not just from our end as the recipient of these possible grants, but these grants, especially nowadays, they have limited funding. They can only support so many places. So they want to make sure that they are getting maximizing the people they can help out along the way. And by doing that, a lot of times including other community issues that might be a part of something your kids can do, and even building it into the grant itself. So not only are you helping my kids learn how to do X, but now we've taken that out into the community. And maybe that community is your classroom. Maybe that community is your school. Maybe you guys have a feeder school. Maybe you're middle school or high school and you want to partner up with somebody else. The more resources, the more people you can bring in, and tying it into a community issue can make your application just have much more impact potentially. Technology, technology, technology. All right. Even if you don't need technology, I keep going back to these colored pencils, and and again, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that is something you need, great. But maybe ask for some colored pencils and 10 iPads, so your kids can first learn how to do the drawing on paper and pencil, and then start transitioning over to using industry-approved software and make that transition. Because again, when those donors are out there saying, hey, we supported somebody, and they're like, they've got their own PR campaigns, they want to make sure that they're sharing that story. And people are like, oh, you just got colored pencils at school? You're kind of cheap. Like, what are you doing there? We want to really make sure that they can say, oh, we've got this technology for this, and they're doing these things. And again, to show that impact across the board for what you're doing, what your students are doing, and what your pathways are doing. Tell that amazing story about some of your students. Think back to when we were applying for college or grad school or whatever it was. They were all this story. Oh, you're just a number. You're just a piece of paper. Like, what is going to set you apart? Well, it's the same thing for grants. You want to have something that they're going to remember you by. And that kind of goes back to the first thing I mentioned, where you got those photos, you've got those images. Those are the things that they want to see that you can be able to do, that you're going to be able to have these stories. You're already doing great things. Because at the end of the day, what donors are, it's not that they want to see their money's been wasted, but it's that the fact that you didn't even be able to finish and do what you wanted to do. So telling those stories, showing some of those earlier successes you had, are going to make you a more viable candidate. All right. Let's get into some of the nuts and bolts here. Okay. I always have people like, Matthew, can you send me like a grant, something that you've written? And I don't, because I have not written a grant that's been the same twice. I've written grants that have been a Google form that was like 4 questions. I've written ones that have been 3 pages, 4 pages. I've written ones that have been 125 pages. So it really is no way to say, here is that golden example. And so what I recommend to people, and what I learned how to do, is really kind of break it into compartments. And you're really like modularizing this, where then, depending upon whatever they're asking, you've got these pieces and you can assemble it together however you need it. And as I find throughout this, they almost always ask for the history of your school or your program. Okay. They're going to ask you for your targeted population. As I said earlier, I'm a Title I school, so I'll definitely mention that. They'll want to see some demographic stuff a lot of times, especially for the bigger ones. If it's a smaller grant, $500, $1,000, they might not need these types of details. But as you get into those larger requests, whether the state grants, whether it's CTIG, whether it's your Perkins grants, and you're making a big request, they are going to want to know this information. Your project needs and your justifications. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, but at this point, when I write a new grant, probably 85% of it's already written, because these other things, the history of my school, targeted population, maybe the population tweaks a little bit here and there, but for the most part, it's the same. But every year I find my way. I want to focus on one project. I want to bring in that classroom that I completely renovated to make it into a studio. Or, you know what, this year I need to upgrade my computers. Like whatever that project is for that year, that is where I spend most of my time as I work on new grants and year after year. But you need to be able to, again, articulate what you need and justify it. Why do you need this? We just need it. Whatever, but again, if you can't justify it, if you can't explain to them, then they're not going to trust the process. Even if you're going to be able to fulfill that, they want to be able to see that you're really delivering on. Benefits to the donors. I spoke about this a little bit earlier. A great quote, advertising says you're good. PR is when somebody else says you're good. And this, again, where if you've got that pitch where you're, not only are we helping my 20 kids in my classroom, but now I've affected 50 families and 3 businesses and 1 community college. That proposal is just going to have more impact. So that same $5,000 they might give to you to just a classroom, they're going to be more apt to give it to you if you're going to affect 500 people, 400 people, 1,000 people. So again, finding ways, and it's got to be authentic. You can't just be like, oh, we're going to help everybody in the neighborhood. You got to really be specific. You got to think about it. And you're going to do a lot of that mental work and footwork before you get into those pages. And I mentioned this, a couple times throughout. So really, what is your impact? And it goes to how many people, what types of stuff. Not only is this going to help my kids learn how to do X, Y, and Z in my classroom today, but they're going to take those skills and that's going to help them get into college. And that's going to help them get into this career. And that's going to help these families who are going to be able to then pay for this, pay for that. Again, that impact is going to hopefully live years beyond what your grant is. And again, that's going to make your grant more appealing, or your application, I should say, more appealing along the way with that. So think about the impact both within, directly affected by that, but then also long-term beyond that. And then ultimately your legacy of success. And this ultimately goes back to the first thing I said as well. When you're taking that picture, when I tell people, I've had my kids submit some of the films that they used for the cameras from this one grant, and they were able to get it into this UCLA film festival. This festival, at least back before COVID, they used to give out cash money for prizes. And I've had 5 different groups win first place, walk away with $3,500 in cash. And to be able to say that this grant then led to my students being able to do this, their confidence, their skill set, their job employment abilities, and the prizes they won, it just makes somebody else want, I trust this program. I trust that they're going to deliver, and they're really going to be able to make this work. All right. So again, those are some of the larger nuts and bolts, but let's sort of see other stuff. And again, some of this you might not see at all unless you're doing a much larger grant, but to ask for a cover sheet, your budget breakdown, almost always they want to know what you're going to spend that on, your timeline of your project. How are you going to determine it's a success? What is going to be that to let you know and let the donors know? Outside funding you might have, key players, key partnerships, demographic stats I mentioned. I've had places ask for tax exempt verification as a public school. That should be easy to do. I've had some grants ask for the program's annual budget. Now, I don't know where everybody's from. I haven't had a chance to look at the chat, but LA Unified is the 2nd largest school district in the nation. Nobody's given me a district budget. Even my school budget is, spread across. We are 2 schools as a span school at my campus. So, sometimes you just got to reach out. It's like, hey, what else could I provide for you? Could you clarify this in a little bit of way? Here's my situation. Obviously, I can get you some type of that information along the way. Letters of support can be really nice. And even if they don't ask for it, to be able to have something from parents of like, my kid has already done this program, already done this thing, it'd be great to see it expanded or whatever. Acknowledgements. I did have one application where not only did we put them into our yearbook to thank them every year, we had a plaque made that was set up in our school to sort of showcase that this was able to be done along the way. So again, finding ways to invite that donor into some of your events that might be, and again, this is if you're doing something larger that actually has an event tied to it, to sort of show that. And they're excited for that. How often do these places have those requests and those opportunities? So All right. And again, I know I'm going a little bit faster just to make sure we get into this, get through everything, and also have a chance for you to ask questions. So if you do have any questions, Ruth, is there anything in there that people have asked so far that might, before I move on to our next section?
I do not see. Everybody is really loving the information.
Okay.
No questions yet.
Okay.
So the biggest question is where can we find these grants? Many websites require membership. What are some reliable sites or resources where we can find legitimate grants that support our
Great
students without
question.
having to pay for access? Yes, that is definitely a
Yeah.
great question. Thank you,
Uh,
Karika.
yeah, I'm going to have us hold on to that one because I will get to that after I go through my next section and we can talk about that a little bit more depth. But great question. And obviously, one that sort of allows everything else to move forward. So. All right, let's get back into our breakdown, and we'll get to that in a moment. Normally, I would show this video, and this is a story that I told from back in my days in Texas, and it was really about one student who came into my classroom. He was a migrant student. He was learning English, going through our ELA program at the time. But he really just kept coming back and tried to learn and do stuff to improve himself. So I have used his story in some of my applications. But again, we've all got a student like Luis. And again, I would normally show this, but I just want to make sure we get through everything else. But think about those students you have. Think about things that are going to make it grounded, make it real for your donors. All right, I want to tell you about the proposal that really kind of took me from those $100, $2,000 grants to really sort of the first big um, grant successes that I have. And I really don't even think about it as a proposal, but really think about it as a story because you want to get them engaged, you want to get those donors riveted by it, and sort of along the way. So this was back before, this was in 2018, I believe, that we were doing this. And my driving question for this class was for I had a documentary film class at the time. How can we create positive career change for our students and engage our community? That was ultimately what my project was going to be before I got to my grant. And basically, we decided we were going to do these socially conscious documentaries about real live nonprofits in our community that were helping students prepare for college. And thinking about it more and more, like I had some cameras for my classroom, but we didn't have stuff where if I wanted my students to truly be making professional documentaries, they got to be able to go out in the world. They got to be able to go on location, go on site. So I wanted to get a little bit of money to buy 8 inexpensive cameras, but professional, sort of that middle, like 200, 300, $400 that my students could use off campus. So that was my proposal. That's sort of what I thought mentally about it. And then I started to do sort of backward planning of how I was going to make this work. And here's how it started. Um, and if we could all mute, I think somebody unmuted on accident there. Thank you. Here's the story. So I started off with my parents and community. I'd been in my school, I think, for 3 or 4 years at the time, and I got familiar with the community, with the parents, stuff like that. But there's still things I didn't know because I did not live directly in the community. We are a magnet school, so about 60% of my kids live in the direct neighborhood there, but a lot of my kids come in as well. So there are also things that might have been a mile away, 2 miles away, a little bit farther away that those other families might be aware of. So I reached out to the parents, our parent center, and our community to see what was there. And here's what we found out. There was one organization called Urban Techs, and this was a summer program for young men of color to learn how to code, learn how to do app design, and learn how to become entrepreneurs. They would pitch these to people in the community, and they could get their own funding anywhere from a couple $100 to up to I think $800 at the time. We had a number of students already doing that. I was familiar with that one, so it was like, great, let's partner up with them, see if they're willing to be a part of it, and go from that. And I will say, if there's anybody in Los Angeles County, LA, a lot of these are still around. If you want to reach out to some of these things, just for your own kids to be able to have access to, not necessarily to write grants to. None of these people gave us grants, but they were our partners in the grant that I wrote. We also had the Salvation Army Red Shield Center. I was familiar with the Boys and Girls Club, but I didn't realize that there were a number of Salvation Army centers across LA that also offer after-school programs. So here you'll see a lot of the kids would go there for after school, just whether it's childcare, whether it's homework, whether it's activities. And not only had some of my high school students done that, but as high school kids, they were there mentoring now, and they were helping out that next generation as well. So we did a documentary on that organization. Iconic in our neighborhood is 24th Street Theater. Very well aware of that. They do after school programs, whether it's improv, whether it's actual larger theater performances, whether it's just public speaking. So again, I had students who did this as younger kids, as participants, and who then as high school kids were mentors there. We did a documentary on them. I was familiar with this. LA Unified, sorry, not LA Unified, LAPDs have the cadet program. In this photo, you'll see three of my students who got up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to this 2 or 3 times a week over their summers and stuff like that. And some of these students were not always the strongest of students in the classroom. They weren't as focused. They weren't really putting in that effort. And they're like, Mr. Waynee, maybe in this cadets program, it's really shown me that I need to take a different approach to get that success I wanted. We did a documentary on them. And these kids who were in this program had to go and talk to the program itself and see if they could get permission to do that. One that I did not know is that the Los Angeles Fire Department also had a cadet program. This is one of my students here. And I was like, I did not know this was there. Can you ask them and see if we can do this? And they let them take, and again, each team was either a group of 3 or 4. So while this student was going through and doing the program, they were able to tell, a couple other students had cameras. They were, oh, you can film this, you can't film this, and kind of did the interviews, but real life experiences going through these documentaries. We did a documentary on that. And in the end, we did about 14 or 15 different organizations. This was all put into the proposal. Again, if we had more time, I would show you one of the documentaries the kids ultimately made from this, but I want to keep moving forward. One reason that I think making documentaries is a very strong way to go. I don't know if we have any other film teachers out there or people who have done film with students. It's in a different capacity, but we've all had our kids try to do narratives, and usually the script is similar to the last superhero movie they just saw. They are casting it with their friends, which is awesome and good, but there's no way I'm going to believe Jose is a 75-year-old old man, no matter how many times you put that hat on and glasses on. So, it's just, it's not going to be as authentic. It's going to be a little comical, whether they intend it to be or not. But a documentary, if you sit somebody down and you ask them real, authentic questions about their life, about their struggles, about their successes, you're going to get vibrant, emotional, tugging at your heart reactions. And that is stuff that my kids could do. When they are making these documentaries, if they've come up with that proposal, if they go into that one nonprofit and say, hey, how has this organization changed your life? What is the impact you've had? They're getting real impressive, like just really, grabbing your heart types of reactions to it. And not only that, and this again was all in the proposal, my students were learning to collaborate and how to communicate with their classmates as they worked in these teams of 3 or 4. They were able to develop interviewing skills, not only interviewing other people, but being interviewed. And this is another way to improve their public speaking skills, their ability to interact and speak with other people and be able to dig deeper into what they're talking about. Storytelling via editing, traditional skills that you're going to need to get those jobs out in the real world, and ultimately basic industry skills, the equipment they're able to use and able to go from that. All this, again, was in that. And ultimately made my students great community citizens. Okay. Right here and there, this would be an amazing proposal. You've got all the impact across my students, across communities outside of, nonprofits outside of my classrooms. But I wanted to push it a little bit more. We wanted to do a little bit more. So on top of all this, we also decided to put on a film festival. So we did this for one Sunday in late spring, where, and the only thing I did is I went out and I found us a theater that donated its space. It had about 220 seats. They donated to us completely for free. They had a great lobby area and everything else the students were a part of. And all of this stuff was in the proposal for the grant. My students, and this is where we worked across multiple classes. We had some graphic design classes. We actually had an ad design class for a few years. And then we had kids doing promotions. They were creating these posters and flyers for it. We had some of our seniors be like, you know what, we want to do more pep rallies to let people know about this event going on so that their families could come, other students could come. And again, we're a K through 12 campus, so even some of the middle school kids would see these pep rallies, all organized by the students. I had some of my seniors come in and was like, Mr. Waynee, I can't tell you. These ninth graders, they're just not focused. They're not doing their work. They're not staying on top of their deadlines. What is it with kids nowadays? It's like, oh, I hear the pain you're feeling. I can relate to that. So I was like, all right, you can't go into the core classes, but if you can find a few elective classes for maybe the last 5 or 10 minutes of class, get approval from the teachers, you can go and do a little pitch, do a little session for that. Again, it was on them. They had to go out and do that. And I will say, I work the high school kids. If you're a middle school teacher, Some of these things you're not be able to do in the same way. If you're in elementary school, you're not gonna be able to do the same way, but you can kind of scale it and do it in a way where, you know what, instead of going out into the public, we're going to do this stuff inside the classroom. We're going to do it with classes, two second grade classes, stuff like that. We also had an after school club. Again, if you're in the LA area, Girls Build LA, I think now it's just called Girls Build. They do an amazing community service thing after school. You can actually get some funding from them to sort of help put it together. So that was one of the clubs we had at the time, and they were able to help us build a website. And then we had some social media promos going on as well. And what was most important is out of the 15 films we did, we picked our six best and our six best programs. And we invited those six organizations to our lobby. They each were given a table and they had their own flyers. They had their own sign up things. They had their own videos. They had whatever they wanted to do to promote their own programs. So now our impact is even larger. Now we're actually having parents come up and talk. You know what? I've lived here my whole life. I didn't know that this organization was here. I'm signing my son. I'm signing my daughter up. And sort of being able to do that stuff along the way. So again, our impact continues to grow and grow of what we're able to do. So I sent this proposal out to a handful of different foundations and organizations that had grant funding. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. And again, I was just looking for 8 cameras. That's what I was hoping to get out of this. And in the end, this proposal brought in over $30,000. So, and really kind of showed to me that the more impact you can kind of build into it, again, it's got to be real, it's got to be true, it's got to be stuff your kids can really do. And then obviously this bought me more than the 8 cameras I needed. So I went back and I was like, hey, you know what? We got a little bit more funding. Could I actually use this for lighting instead? Could we actually use this as part of the, because we did have some of the expenses related to our event. So, you know, going back, just being transparent, saying, hey, you know what? Thank you for this. Can we modify this? And some are like, no, we need you to stick with the cameras. Great. You know, then we'll designate this money for that. But often, you know, if you get other funding or outside funding, you know, places are usually pretty good about, yeah, as long as you're upfront about it, instead of this, can we do this? And it still fits within my mission of what we're trying to do. And they were up for us sort of transferring some of those things to different needs that we had. And then I will say there is a video that which I didn't expect, and a online news organization came out and did a story on this event. And so this is a 3-minute video, which I guess I'm having some YouTube connectivity issues right now. But again, so now this video, I will put this into some of the applications that I do now because it's part of the legacy. It's like, hey, you know, other people supported us before and look at what happened. Somebody else is telling the story of what we've done. Is that going to happen for you all the time, anytime? Maybe not, but you never know when these types of things are going to lead to other people hearing about it and coming to you and be like, hey, can we do a story on this? Can we be, or come in and do a news article or whatever it might be. So, all right. All right. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Sort of some of the things to summarize here. Really things to think about as you try to get these grants proposed. Start doing these in small pieces. Don't be afraid of it. Again, you can start with smaller grants. It might only be that Google form, might be 2 or 3 pages. That's fine, but don't be afraid of it. Break it down. Like I talked earlier about, really try to modularize. Like, what's your history? What can you do? What can you write about? What can you talk about? And sometimes you might have to tweak it. Maybe if you're a high school, you're going to focus on your healthcare program in year 1, and then you're going to focus on your engineering pathway in year 2. But some of the stuff is still going to be able to do broken into small pieces. Collaborate with your colleagues. I will say those first couple ones I did, it was just myself doing it, but they were smaller, so I thought I could do it. But as you go up to larger stuff, don't feel like you've got to do it yourself. Talk to your colleagues, and especially, obviously, if you've got 2, 3 teachers working together, that's going to affect more students. It's going to be able to help more students along the way. A lot of this stuff is already written for you. I mean, there is a blurb on your school's website, on your district's website about the history of your school. And maybe you can't just cut and paste it and use it as 100% as it is, but it'll at least give you a foundation. It's written 40%, 60%, 80%, go through and then tweak what you need to along the way. I bring in my counselors. Hey, can you give me the latest demographic stats that we have for this year? Hey, what are some of the needs we have? Other teachers, what are we doing in this class? Just sort of find those things that are already written, that are already out there. And also, when you go back to those things you've already taken pictures, you're like, oh, you know what? I can use that one video of the kids winning that award at that UCLA Film Festival and put it into this one. I don't have to rewrite that, get those photos again. I've got them. Once you're done, you can reuse these parts over and over again. I mentioned that. Now, when I write a grant, every year I write a new grant for a new project. but 85, 90% of my application is already written. Maybe I got to tweak a few things here and there, and it's really just that project. That first one, that first big one you're going to write is not going to be easy, but it's doable, and you can do it. You can do it with some of these steps of breaking it down into smaller pieces or collaborating with your colleagues. The first year or two, I tried to find a lot of different grants. Oh, this one was for audio stuff. This is for this, and this. I'm a full time teacher. Most of you are have your full time jobs. I didn't have time to write 6 different grants per year, and that's why I focus on one project, one idea, one thing. All right, I want to do my computer upgrade. Oh, I want to do that room that I'm going to change into a studio space. Like whatever that one thing is, I write that grant, and then I try to find multiple places to send it out to. Okay, submit it many times out into the world. All right, so let's talk about some of these resources and some of these places that you can kind of think. In general, before we get to some out of the box stuff, it's really going to depend upon what you are looking for in a way. Like I will do Google searches and stuff like that, especially if you're doing smaller things. And people be like, "Oh, you're in LA, you probably got a lot more resources, especially for film and animation," and that is true. But I also find that in LA, everybody's trying to do film. Everybody's trying to do animation. But like it isn't unique. It isn't novel. So even if you're outside and in a smaller town, go to your community colleges. Go to your credit unions. I know in LA County, the California Credit Union, at least they used to do it. I don't know if they still do it. They would offer twice a year $250 or $500 grants for up to 20 teachers at a time, once in the spring, once in the fall. Again, I don't know if they still do that, but that's a great way to start something small, something a little bit easier to sort of get your feet wet as you begin this process. I'm also a Title I school, so I will do searches for Title I will do searches for film or for arts, for media. And you really kind of have to be specific to what you're ultimately looking for because you're going to find a lot of nonprofits that will be supportive of certain things. Now, I will tell you one thing as we lead into this out of the box thing. They don't do it anymore, but for 2 years, doing that search, I found an organization that was an oil company, but they had a grant for arts because they wanted to support arts. And if your school was within 20 miles of any of their kind of facilities that did this work, you were eligible. And I'm like, oil company for arts is like, all right, I'm gonna do it. Well, not too many people applied to that. So that year I won a $5,000 grant from this oil company because again, am I searching oil companies? Is that the first thing that pops in my head? No, it's not. So sometimes just doing those search and, change your keywords, change your search terms. Once you start getting to bigger and bigger stuff, I almost do a lot of my stuff now through the grants, the California Department of Ed. If you're looking for stuff that's 50,000, 100,000, $250,000, those are going to be larger things, but those are going to be things where you are going to need to bring in a collaboration. It's going to need to be a nonprofit, maybe a community college, maybe multiple schools, maybe it's a district-wide grant. And if you can initiate that, especially if you're at a smaller district, you might have some more success being able to do that because it can fund multiple schools and things like that. I did see, and back to the question that somebody asked, like I have never done anything where I'm paying to find resources and stuff like that. I think nowadays there's enough stuff out there. You can try to use your AI search things to sort of find other stuff that might be out there as well. Just do know, especially with what's going on in the government, a lot of funding being pulled here and there. It is a little bit more challenging because there's fewer buckets of money, fewer pots of money, and more people looking to apply. And that's why you want to make sure your stuff has even more impact to it as you're looking to sort of get that out there. I want to share one other out of the box thing, and and all grants aren't necessarily money. Keep that in mind as well. This was back before COVID as well, and we've actually did it 2 times after that. But the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History offered back when Hamilton was the hottest thing in the world. They were like, if you have a history program, and every school does, at the high school level, and your juniors want to be a part of this, we will let them go for free. We'll pay for the buses, we'll pay for this, we'll pay for that. The kids had to create artistic project. So whether it was a poem, whether it was a rap, whether it was a song, whether it was a dance, it had to be something that was performance based. And so I partnered up with our history teachers. Let's get this going because a lot of my film teachers, a lot of my animation, sorry, not teachers, a lot of my film students and animation students are in that class. So it was going to be beneficial to that. We had to be a Title I school. I sort of took the charge on that and kind of was the lead writer. But we ended up getting that, and the kids were just like blown away. And them were like, "Oh, Mr. Waynee, can I scalp this ticket for $500?" Like, no, you cannot scalp the ticket we just won from this grant for any money, but go there and enjoy it. And we actually had one of our students, very shy, very quiet, always a hardworking student, but her performance got selected by the organization, and she was up on Pantage's stage. If you're from Los Angeles at all, it is a 2,700 seat theater, mega theater, and she got to be up there. News story came out, not just on her, but on a few other students from other schools. But again, that ended up in a number of my grants following that, where again, the grant we did led to something bigger and better. So again, think about not just only money, what other resources you could get, and think outside of what your specific box might be there. All right, so what did we learn today? We learned you should photograph everything you are doing, your students are doing, brainstorm a project, find the importance of community and technology to incorporate those into your proposals. Think about a moving personal story about your program, but students, how you guys are already affecting them. Try to break this into small, doable pieces. And I will tell you, I think about this often. If I never had written a grant, the best I ever would have done was earn $0 for my students. If I wrote a grant, the worst I could do is earn $0 for my students. But the throwing that stuff out there has helped me earn over $3 million for my students and other schools and pathways out there and counting. So if you don't try, I can guarantee you you'll never get a grant. And maybe it won't be that first one or second one, but start small, start with people that you collaborate with, and you guys will be successful in no time. All right, I think that might be it. I do want to say I'm going to take any questions. If you want to take a picture of this QR code or the link there, if you want to share your information with me, I try to send out some emails or newsletters a couple times a year as well, if you want to do that. But I know we've got about 10 minutes, I think, Ruth, for questions or so of what people might
Sure
have.
thing. It strikes me as, you mentioned how we don't know what the next level of funding is going to happen. It strikes me as an important component to remind everybody how important it is for us to be engaged with what's happening at the state and federal level when funding is, we're trying to work hard to get money for our classrooms and elevate that voice. So I'm just going to say it that way and speak with your civic mindset as Hamilton did, right? So thank you for that. You got me all fired up, right, Hamilton? But I love this. Amazing. Let's go in and look at our questions. What do there's a couple more up here. Let's see. What do I do? What if I do not know how to make documentaries? I'm technology deficient, no knowledge of editing. What are some thoughts on that? And then Richard will take your question right after that question.
Great. Yeah. And again, a documentary is something that is specific to a film and stuff like that. And I think even if you don't feel comfortable with it, it's something, if you've got some iPads, if you've got some of those point and shoot cameras, your kids could do it. And it's really like, hi, I want to do this. And then you put a few video photos over it. But outside of that, even if you don't feel comfortable have those abilities, a documentary doesn't have to be what you're doing. But I sort of think about the proposal I had and what could you guys do from there? Maybe you guys are doing posters. Maybe you're an elementary class doing posters and doing their own kind of promo book or something like that could be done. So think about it on your level. Could we incorporate some technology? That'd be great. But again, it is not essential. You could still have a powerful and impactful idea for what that project is going to be at the end. What I would recommend is not just saying, oh, here's my list of things I need. Because while that could get you grants at some places that are kind of smaller, they're going to want to see why you want it, what's the reason, what's the rationale, how are your kids going to benefit, and stuff like that. So even if it's not something that you're able to do documentary-wise or technology-wise, what is sort of in your wheelhouse, what is really going to help your students, and think about the standards. What can sort of help them get to that next level? And maybe it's like pilot program at first. I'm going to do this with like one of my classes. And then we're going to try it across multiple classes, or it's just one classroom if you're at elementary, or maybe it's a middle school pathway. But really finding something that you are comfortable with. It doesn't have to be film based, but I'd still take those pictures and have some visuals to sort of support what it is that you're doing. Great question. Richard, I think you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. So number one, first of all, thanks for sharing the process. And I like that you kept it very generic, right, to be able to go across so many different pathways. My question specifically with LA Unified, and I know I work with teachers who would love to have access to additional funding. How does it look like on your end to have some type of fundraising? And I don't know if you separate fundraising versus grants to it making sure it goes to your program rather than through the associate student body, um, uh, generically speaking. So can
For
you
sure.
talk about those challenges, please?
Yes, for sure. I will say I don't do much fundraising at all to determine in that way. Our school does things like that. I will be right. The grants that I write are pretty, especially as you get into the larger grants. There might be some indirect funding that's going to go to the district and stuff like that. But in the grants, especially when it's a little bit larger, they're going to say, no, it needs to be used for how it's proposed. And so that does keep it. It doesn't go into, oftentimes the grants I get will go under their own funding line so that I will have access to it. And as you get into the larger ones, which I might not have mentioned, like you're almost guaranteed to be able to, you're going to have to do some reports. We did X, we did Y, we did Z. We might have had some challenges. What were those? We had some successes. What were those? So I know for me, if you're doing something a little bit smaller, if you're doing something that's donors choose and stuff like that, then you might run into some, oh, that's going to go into our general funding bucket at a school, whether you're LA Unified or outside of that. But even the ones for like $500 or $2,000, when I wrote it specifically for, I need to buy new cameras, I need to get some new lighting equipment. And my schools have been very supportive. Since I've been there for the last 13 years, I've had three different principals, and they've all been very supportive. And to them, in a way, it's a win-win. I get to ask, hey, can I go on this field trip that I have funding for? Can I get cameras that I have funding for? They're like, yeah, you have funding for it. It doesn't take money out of my budget, out of the rest of the stuff I can spend on. Yes, I support you. And then also to be able to have that ability to, whether it's a field trip, covering for your bus. And I will say, in some of the grants, you can even have funding set up to pay for your sub. If you're going to be that, go and be that chaperone for that stuff. So you can also think of different ways from that. And some grants won't allow that. Some grants won't do that, but you can definitely look to see what it is. So a lot of answers there to your question, Richard. I hope that answered it. But in the end of the day is, yeah, if you do get into that fundraising element, then you might not have as much control over that funding as far as how it is. But if you're writing a grant to an organization, and I tell my principal and stuff like, if we don't follow through on the stuff that we articulated, we're not going to be able to be up for that next grant. Or, word is going to spread that, we're not reliable at what we ask for and we deliver. So great question.
Looking to see if there's other questions. Tia, I'll look into that in a minute. Um, and oh, this one might not be on the day two survey form because it got moved from day one.
Yeah.
So let me see if it's on the day one form, and maybe I'll just drop the day one form in there. But thank you for bringing that to our attention, Tia. And I dropped in the workshop conference schedule. And unfortunately, though, Tia, then you won't be able to be registered for the let me see what I can do about that. Okay.
I do see one in there. While you do that, Ruth, you can take care of that.
Yeah, grants
Janet, how do you,
differentiate.
yeah,
Yeah.
grants differentiate from a director who works on grants versus the teacher? And you mean like the director at a school versus like a film director type stuff? Is that what you're, Janet, if you want to respond to that or add some clarification?
I, excuse me. Yes, I can respond. So my question that I had was, because I know you had mentioned that LUSD is already big itself as a district. And so I'm at Glendale, and so our director is the one that does all the like the grants through Perkins and such forth and all a variety. And so money just keeps flowing in, but I just want to know what's the difference between like from the grants that you have submitted versus like if it was a director or if there's a
Great.
director that oversees your department. And so I just want to know the difference. And do you find it that there's more success if the teacher were to submit the grants versus the director? So I just wanted to just get an idea.
Great question. Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like a Perkins or a CTIG or any of the large ones, those are going to be written by the district. And so the Perkins grants that I've written, I have done that application within LA Unified, because then once LA Unified, to use that as an example, gets their bucket, then they've got, all their different pathways, all the teachers across those pathways. So those applications I'm doing in district, inter-district. But a lot of the stuff that I've gotten from, there are other ones that are out there that are specific for animation and video production pathways, CTE ones. So those are state ones. And sometimes we've been like pilot programs for some of these, and other times you'll find them out there. But I will also then write stuff outside of that, and outside of the district, what they control. But yeah, if you're talking about your CTIG, your Perkins, that is probably going to be within your district. You're not going to be able to write that, because that is looking for X number of collaborators, X number of partners, X number of whatever, and that's just going to go above and beyond what I could do, what you could do. But there are also things out there that are school-based grants, and especially in your CTE, because the one thing now, especially over the last 5 years, apprenticeships have really been pushed even more so. I mean, apprenticeships have always been there for your traditional, your construction, your agriculture, your even engineering and stuff like that. But for animation and video production, those things weren't always out there. And as those are starting to be introduced in other pathways as well, from education, stuff like that. But if it is based on like training your kids for job skills and job careers, that is a very hot thing right now. Even with all the stuff that been actually happening with funding getting pulled, like more money is getting put into apprenticeships and jobs. And they basically want to offer kids, like, you don't have to go to college, you don't have to run up the big debt. Anything that can get them job ready is going to be out there that you, in theory, could write. And again, if it's something like 50,000, even maybe $75,000 or less, it very likely could be a single school one. Once you get above that, and it's not a hard and fast, it's not 100% set in stone, but once you get larger than that, you're going to need to bring in stuff that might be beyond your scope, or not but like a single teacher scope or a single school scope. So,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
yep. All right, might have time for one more question.
Yeah, I just want to let everybody know, we are working on that day 2 menu option. So if I can't get that fixed, what I recommend is, let me see if I've heard back, but maybe just link this, like click the student panel one, and in the comments say that you attended the grant writing one and write your comments there, because we want to make sure that you get into the raffle. So I'm doing my best. I don't, let me see what we can do, but that can be our backup for now.
Sounds good.
I have a question, Ruth.
Yes.
The thing was, I wanted to know because I know that there was another one that was at 11 o'clock. Can we choose that one? And then in the notes section or in the comment section, put that we came to this one?
I did not facilitate that one, so I don't want to speak to that one, Nisha. I can only speak to this one because I can let the team know to move that. But yeah, I can only speak to this one. So feel free to do it the way I recommended for this one. I don't want to speak to the second one. Yeah, that's what I can do right now.
Okay. All right. I think.
Wait a minute. Excuse me. I'm confused. I'm trying to find out that because I'm looking and it doesn't have the art grant proposal writing. So you want us to put what when it says?
Actually, give me a minute. I'm going to correct it right now. So everybody hold off on doing the survey. I will take care of it right now. And let's honor, I think, Jessica, if you have a question for Matthew.
Thanks so much. I'm curious. I love the idea of including the artifacts, the videos, and the pictures. I've never seen a section of a grant where it calls out for that. So where do you include that in the grant proposal?
I will put it into the written part. I was like, oh, we have done this film festival before, look at, and I'll put in basically like sort of an appendix for it, and be like, look at the end of this writing, you see some videos of that or some films to it, or even some photos to it. So yeah, I mean, I've seen very few where like you cannot send us photos and videos and stuff like that. And you just want to make sure that they're one really relevant and related to it. You just have to throw in whatever you've done. But yeah, I've because to me it's when we read something, when we see it visually, it's more true to them and stuff like that. So sometimes I'll even embed it into if I'm doing a Word doc or a Google Doc, like I'll embed it into that very page itself. Again, unless they've got, it's a 6-page minimum or limit or whatever. So I will just include it in there. But I will have some places, some of the grants, especially some of the bigger ones, will be like, show us a lesson you've done or show us a project you've done.
Oh my gosh, I just lost power. So let me see what I can do about getting this form. I'm working in the middle of this form and yeah, this is fun. Oh, yay, got it back. Sorry about that.